What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to FudgeMuppet. I'm Scott here with Michael and Drew. As always, this is the Elder Scrolls podcast, and today we've got a little fun one to bring in the new year. We are looking at all of the armor sets that have a comparable equivalent throughout Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim, and we're basically ranking them. Who did it best? We're going to look at all of the armor sets and have some fun subjective discussion. Now, of course, there's a few things to bear in mind. First, I just want to say, for Skyrim, we're not going to be factoring in all of the Creation Club stuff because that gives it a way unfair advantage because it just adds in all of these alternate extra sets and stuff like that. We're also giving concessions for graphics. So we're looking more so at the actual like design of the armor and kind of like imagining if it had like a graphical equivalent. Because if you look at Morrowind, like obviously there's some like limitations in terms of the models and stuff.
And Oblivion just looks better in general across the board, just for the aesthetic of the whole game.
Okay, well we got some stuff to talk about. So, but yeah, so also we've also included, for example, for the leather armor, there was no like just leather in Morrowind, but there's netch leather. So we're using like the closest equivalent where we can. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we can jump straight into it. So let's sort of generally try and like follow along like the ranks of rarity and stuff like that. But
we'll start with iron.
Yeah, iron armor. All right, I want to hear your guys' thoughts.
I actually quite like Morrowind's iron armor. It's a bit tin can, like a tin can robot-y, but I like that. It just feels a little bit more alien and a bit more special. Oblivion's iron armor is a bit. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It's nothing great. And with Skyrim, I think that it's hard for me to be objective because I've seen the Dragonborn so many times, and I'm kind of over it, to be honest.
What's your take, Drew?
None of them are particularly interesting. I think Skyrim is the most iconic because I think it's probably the only one that, just looking at it as iron armor, you could probably place it in the province. You know, even though if we're talking Vikings, there shouldn't be horns, but you know what I mean. I think Skyrim's is the most interesting to look at, but at the same time, to me personally, Morrowind's is the coolest. Like, if I had to wear it, that's the one I'd wear.
I actually agree on Morrowind. I like Morrowind the most because I think, like, Iron set, it should just be the most basic, like, any sort of mercenary could be wearing that kind of thing. It just feels like this is your starter armor. It's just some iron, and I like the full set kind of look. I do like in Skyrim, like obviously it's iconic and stuff like that, but I do prefer a little bit more armor that rather than the sort of like, you know, tank top kind of vibe, like, you know, I was at. But I will say banded iron armor, the added like that ups Skyrim's a bit more for me, and I do like them all. Oblivion's helmets are pretty bad. I don't like it. But
That's something you have to give Skyrim some credit for, is they actually had. Because we're always asking for more armor variants in the next Elder Scrolls game. Skyrim actually did have a fair few. Not a whole ton, but it was there. I'd love to see a lot more, but more than Oblivion, for example. Like, I think a good example of that is looking at steel and how in Skyrim you had the steel with like the Imperial or kind of Nordic braces and boots and stuff, and you also had steel plate as an extra, and Oblivion was just steel. Yeah. So I think it's a good time to go into steel, move on from iron and talk about it.
Although, one last thing on iron, if we're going to talk in any way about practicality, Skyrim's is probably the weakest because you get both your arms chopped off.
Yeah.
I think we can agree to that.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, as a preface, I like, in the same way that I've talked about this before with, like, weapons, I really like the believable weapons mods in Skyrim, and basically that you can have a really fantasy looking, like, it's unrealistic, but it's like realistic unrealistic, if that makes sense. Like, it's a very fantasy looking thing, but it still looks normal. The closer it gets to bigger and wilder, and a lot of the time it goes the same for armor for me. Like, I like it to a reasonable degree, but sometimes it can get a little bit like, you know, little.
Funnily enough, on a side note, I actually watched some armor comparison videos before this podcast, and I noticed that a lot of the armors in Skyrim actually look less kind of crazy and intense. Like some of the latest sets, like Daedric and Ebony and things like that, when you don't scale the weight all the way to the max. Because whenever I play Skyrim by default, I just like, you know, I'm Ronnie Coleman, let's put the muscle to the limits. But
the booba.
Yeah, but if you actually see them in like a middleweight or even a mid to lower end weight, they don't look as over the top.
Yeah.
But let's talk about steel. What do I think about steel? I have to say, if I'm not including steel plate from Skyrim, I'm a big fan of Oblivion's set. It's very nostalgic for me. I like the classic vibe, and I think if you're gonna have a really classic vibe with any armor set, steel is a good one to have.
See, with Skyrim's version of steel, steel plate's cool, but like if you're looking at just like the default steel, it does actually lean a little bit more into that sort of kind of modern manufactured look, which I kind of don't like as much, like the cuirass especially. But I like Oblivion's and I like Morrowind's, but it's like I actually think I would like Morrowind's more if it was like obviously a higher graphics. I like the closed-face helmets. I just like that sort of style. Like if you can kind of imagine it as that both are full steel sets, like a knight, like a 15th century kind of knight kind of thing. But yeah,
I mean, if we are including steel plate, I really like the steel plate from Skyrim. I love the helmet from Skyrim. So are we counting that here, or is that a separate section?
I think pick first, and then we'll decide if whatever we pick is better than steel plate from Skyrim.
The general steel armor for Skyrim, I'm not a fan of whatsoever. Yeah. And it doesn't, it's very boring looking. I don't think anyone chooses to wear steel armor in Skyrim.
It's just Lydia's armor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think Morrowind's is nicer than Oblivion's, but something about the entire art style of Oblivion, steel armor looks really clean and pristine, and it suits the kind of a knight wearing it more than any of the other games. So I'm leaning towards Oblivion.
Yeah. I mean,
I can really see like, I don't know if it would be fair to say a Dark Souls vibe in the Morrowind steel. Mm-hmm. It's just something a bit different, very classic looking. I do like how Oblivion's has that one pauldron. It's not is it a pauldron? What do you call the spike that comes out where the pauldron is?
I guess it's part of the pauldron, right?
Some kind of net guard thing. Anyway, I like that one side's bigger than the other in Oblivion as well.
I think the bassinet is what sells it for Morrowind. Yeah, like closed helmets do look cooler than having especially in Oblivion with your goofy face hanging out.
Yeah. I would lean with Morrowind, but if you guys wanted to like veto and make it Oblivion, like I wouldn't be cut at all. Like it's like Oblivion's still good.
For me, steel armor in Morrowind is obviously it's different to iron armor in Morrowind, but it has that same energy, I guess, in the sense that you're the tin can man.
Yeah, but I guess that's kind of like the point of that.
Yeah, I'm leaning Oblivion.
I'm leaning Oblivion, but I do like Morrowind's.
All right.
I think there's going to be a trend of, I don't want to predict too soon, but I think Oblivion, it's going to be hard to throw them bones. So when it's close, I'm going to maybe be a little biased towards Oblivion.
That's fair.
All right. Well, next, let's have a look at some of the light ones. And we can start off with one of the most sort of basic with leather armor. Now, leather, there is one in Skyrim, there is one in Oblivion, but the closest equivalent in Morrowind would be netch leather, which is kind of just like the local leather and stuff they
I think
use.
Morrowind has to win here, right? Like netch leather just looks so unique and cool, and when you see it with the different like masks and goggles and it's just so alien.
And even the base stuff, like with like just the little details on it, and there's like more like chains and loops and scarves and stuff, like. Yeah.
It is really cool. And I must say, I was not really a fan of leather armor in either Oblivion or Skyrim. I would say I like it more in Oblivion. It's without the helmet. I really, and that's a trend we'll see with Oblivion, is that some of the helmets are a bit, not my favorite. So I probably would give it to Oblivion over Skyrim. And there's definitely some Thieves Guild nostalgia there for me, like for sure.
I didn't mind leather armor in Oblivion, like obviously without the helmet. Wasn't a fan in Skyrim, really.
I feel like in both games, to an extent, it was intentionally boring. It's kind of almost supposed to be low-level gear that you.
Well, that's the thing.
Rapidly get past.
I guess you keep in mind is that like some of these earlier sets are. I think you can forgive more that there's less wow factor because it's not supposed to. It's supposed to be standard fare, kind of everyone has that armor.
I don't know if everyone shares this opinion, but one of the reasons I didn't like Skyrim's leather was not because it didn't stand out. It was actually because it for me, it popped off the body a little bit too much.
Just doesn't...
Which might be realistic potentially in terms of kind of being better at absorbing shock and things like that. But I kind of like the tighter skin, leather wrapped look. Not like shrouded armor wrapped, like not like superhero Dark Brotherhood mode, but
yeah,
I just think it looks a bit too like, popping off the shoulders and the...
There's probably lots of mods for tight leather I'm sure you could find.
Well,
you'd know all about that, wouldn't you?
The other really basic one is fur armor, which in Morrowind, the closest equivalent would be just the Nordic fur. So there's the fur across Oblivion, Skyrim, and then Nordic fur. If I was to put my thing out, like I'm never really... Fur helmets don't really do it for me either, but... I'm actually quite partial to the Oblivion fur armor. I just like the little skull fixture and stuff and the kind of like color a little bit more. Secondarily, I'd probably... I'd go the Skyrim one, just because there was a few variations and it really is that rugged like pelt look. And there's the one where there's like just the skirt, no top thing. And then there's one with the look shawl thing. And then there's one that's fully enclosed. But yeah.
Can you count Colovian fur helms as fur armor?
I guess you could, but yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I would say actually, funnily enough, the Nordic fur in Morrowind, I feel like you can see how the fur armor in Oblivion was like an evolution of it, or like meant to stay in the same realm. I'd probably vote Oblivion, honestly, I think. But I don't know. What do you guys think? Even I prefer the Oblivion helmet out of all of them as well, but I still don't really like it much.
Yeah, I think I'd lean towards Oblivion as well.
It is nice. I actually think I would go with Skyrim in this case.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you said, I really liked the variants. I had some really cool characters who used fur. I just like it. It has more of that kind of rugged look. Oblivion's looks too, for me at least, I can appreciate it, but like it's too like pelty and clean looking. Like it looks almost like that if they didn't have weapons and it wasn't always bandits wearing it and they didn't have the shield on, you could almost imagine it like some skull kind of group if you chucked the hood on it or something like that. Like it's not...
I think that's kind of why I like it. Like I do prefer it looks like functional fur armor to keep you warm.
Like as opposed to that in Skyrim, it's kind of barbaric and it's been thrown together and it's for people living in the wild. That works really well. I think obviously fur armor often gets overshadowed by the fact that there are some cool fur variants, like your armor of the old gods, your savior's hide, things like that. You rarely will wear fur armor if you have access to those.
And just in terms of variants, I actually, as much as I love making a cool barbarian character, with their bare chest out, swinging their sword, I actually do like Skyrim's fully covered variant of the fur armor, and you can really dress it up. You can put like this. I know this is not what we're ranking, but you can put the kind of Stormcloak bear helm on top with the Stormcloak officer boots and gauntlets with the full set of fur, and it's just nice. But anyway.
I don't know. Is that 2 for Oblivion, 1 for Skyrim?
Well, Iron went to Morrowind.
Iron went to Morrowind. Steel went to Oblivion.
I'm going to say Oblivion,
yeah.
I think, if I'm the deciding vote.
All right.
Leather went to Morrowind, and Fur
went to Oblivion.
Apparently.
So now we can kind of... I guess technically it's funny to call it early, because it is a sort of only... I think it's Skyrim equivalent to Steel, but there is... Look, there's Bonemold, right? Which, this is going to be the quickest one. There is Oblivion. There is basically the Dragonborn DLC introduced Bonemold for Skyrim. But then obviously there's Bonemold kind of in Morrowind and many variants of. And I would probably just say Morrowind, just because Morrowind had so many options and stuff. And it just looks really cool. Like, once again, like concessions for graphics, like, you'll mention it.
The variants definitely sells it. I think if you could only compare one to another, maybe it's closer, but all of the helmets are so fascinating in Morrowind.
Yeah. I think Morrowind definitely.
Yeah, I think that's what sells it. And even so, like I do like it in Skyrim, but I do think Skyrim went like... It's kind of cool, and I could appreciate it as a variant, but I don't know, like some of the bone mold in a Morrowind, you know, it has like the Daedric written on it, and has little like horn, like little symbols and pieces everywhere. The Skyrim one looks...
It's a little neat.
Neater.
Especially when, you know, you've told the story of how bone mold was supposedly created as well.
Well, with bone mold too, I think like the color in Morrowind is a slightly like you're about to say, like that kind of more put together. It looks like ground bone sort of bound in resin a little bit more.
Have you seen the Skywind bone mold with the fur wraps and stuff? Oh my, it is.
I've probably have, but I've
so cool. I'll just send it to you.
Yeah.
I'll just send it to you. I'm like 95% sure it's from Skywind. If it's from somewhere else, I apologize.
But I think bone mold is up there with potentially one of the coolest kinds of armor in the whole series. Yeah. Even if we're not comparing it against itself, if we're comparing it to other armors in general.
Actually, even that example, not sure it's from or whatever, if it might be from the Skywind thing, kind of looks like it. But see how like the detail on the actual like pauldrons or the chest piece, it looks like there's a grainier sort of look to it, a little pieces, whereas the Skyrim one looks like a very clean yellow looking. I still like it, but I do think... If not the more Morrowind sort of.
Morrowind's one's cooler. I just really like. I would use this Skywind one. For a build. Or something. It's funny. It almost has a bit of a Sith vibe to it. You could give it a lightsaber, and I feel like you could see that on Korriban or something.
But I feel like we're going with Morrowind for Bonemold. So fur leather. Okay, so now we're sort of like dipping into some of the more interesting ones. So here's one. It'll be interesting to hear. But what do we think about Dwarven? Yeah.
Tricky because of the graphics, I think, makes it a bit difficult.
Well,
like in Morrowind, I actually don't think Morrowind wins for me just because it's so intense. Like the boots are these it's very, very anime looking.
From what I understand, and I can't remember, this is going to have to be a little bit sourced, trust me, bro. But from what I've heard before and writings and so on, and different, obviously every single game has different interpretations and so on. But Dwarven armor in Morrowind was more so supposed to be armor made by people kind of after the fact using pieces of Dwarven metal that they found, whereas Dwarven in Oblivion and Skyrim is quite like more explicitly what they wore, the dwarves wore. So this one is sort of like a makeshift armor out of Dwemer machinery.
It
like
looks salvaged,
Yeah.
Things aren't form-fitting, and you can almost get the idea that they came from completely different machines that have been repurposed.
Yeah.
It's so hard for me because there's actually there's elements from each armor set that I like more. For example, I really like the shield in Oblivion.
Yeah,
I really think the shield's nice.
I think I would go with. I think ultimately I'd probably go with Skyrim's, and the reason being too, like. The dwarves of like they've always had like a Mesopotamian sort of feel that you saw the dwarves, the ghosts and stuff with their beards and so on and stuff like that. And I think the dwarven stuff in Skyrim, and I've talked about before how Skyrim seems more like a direct like aesthetic continuation of Morrowind more than Oblivion did. And I kind of Oblivion's is really, really cool too. But I actually really do like the face thing, the face carving and stuff that they've done for the Dwarven.
The Skyrim face is so iconic. And I think if you removed all the lore and you were just looking at these in a lineup and you had no context, Oblivion wins it for me in terms of just looking cool. But there are aspects about it that I don't really... That's not how I envision the dwarves.
I know what you mean. It's kind of
Oblivion loses me a bit for that.
If you put that armor and if you put it in another... Like it could kind of like you could easily be convinced. I think I could be if you told me this is gold armor. It's a certain type of armor or something like that. There's nothing distinctively, I guess, Dwarven outside of the color or brass armor or
this
something.
Isn't like Lord of the Rings where the dwarves are inherently like kind of sharp edges and very kind of, because in the films at least they were depicted as kind of, you know, everything was slightly hexagonal rather than round and things like that. And I don't think that is the case with the Dwemer. In the Elder Scrolls, they can be more artistic in how they create certain things. yet somehow still Oblivion's armor it almost feels more like it was like gold armor that's been designed by a different elven culture that's more in tune with beauty and things like that than the practicality of the Dwemer.
It's just in the Skyrim one, I just think it just looks... It's really good. It keeps that Mesopotamian sort of look of things, and with the face and the visage and everything. But then it also does still have, like, you know, even just the purple cloths and stuff. But it has that like robotic-ish sort of look with the shield and the pauldrons and the stuff. So it kind of a nice blend of it. I kind of get like if you look at Dwarven armor in Skyrim, you go like, oh yeah, that belongs to these Mastercrafter Dwemer, the ancient race of elves that made robots. Whereas I don't really get that same vibe with the Oblivion armor. I don't really. Do you know what I mean? And then arguably even the Morrowind one is just salvaged sort of robot looking stuff. So I just think Skyrim's is the most Dwemer vibe.
I think that would be fair to say. Like, I really like the Oblivion one, but I understand what the two of you are saying about it, and I kind of agree.
Yeah.
But I think aesthetically it's really cool. I'd rate it above the Morrowind one.
Yeah.
I like them all, but for me the Morrowind one would definitely be the lower end because it's makeshift.
And when you put it on, it is kind of goofier looking as opposed to that, like,
you look like some Gundam.
You are kind of a cyborg.
You're a mech.
Yeah. But so I think we'll put Dwarven Skyrim wins the Dwarven stuff too.
All right.
And, you know, other things boasted to it, but it's like, it's got like a very good aesthetic cohesive look with all of the rest of the ruins and the automatons. Like, for example, like, you know, the Centurions have that kind of face, and then you look at the helmets got the same face, and their idols and everything all have the same kind of motifs.
The Sky Oblivion Dwarven is cool as well. It's very, very smooth looking, but I like it still.
Yeah. Well, okay, so here's one, and I wonder if I'll just get vetoed out of this because I have opinions we talked about before, but Orcish, and I am a really big fan of Morrowind's Orcish and also Oblivion after it because, and not that I dislike Skyrim's or anything, but Skyrim is like, oh, here we go, my Uruk-hai sort of orc armor. But the one thing I kind of like about the orcs is you have this really like, you know, ugly race and they're all like brutish and everything. But the one thing they've repeatedly told us, they're these master smiths, they're these great artisans. The Imperial Legion wants them for this. But then they have like, they actually create this really beautiful armor. And I'm a big fan of contrast, and I just think it's more interesting. But I like the idea that there's this orcish set here, that it's like you see these barbaric orcs and people associate them as these ugly green things that come and rage villages. But it's like, look at that armor and it's even got like the tusked motifs and everything on it.
Yeah.
And
I don't think you're gonna get vetoed at all.
Oh, okay. I think before we've had a conversation about.
I think
maybe it was related to orcs or something.
Maybe I'm wrong because I think the conversation was actually about Oblivion's Orcish versus Skyrim.
I think it was.
We talked about Morrowind's one, but I like Morrowind's one the most. But then I would actually put Skyrim's second just because I don't know, man. I just love that big, brutish orc vibe that it has. I know Oblivion's helmet definitely kills it for me.
Yeah.
And also the fact that the orcs were super cartoonishly green. When you see one wearing it, it just looks a bit, Shrekky. But Morrowind's does actually win for me.
I had my Nord character in Oblivion in all orcish armor with no helmet and a katana, and I used to because I was like, an emerging weeaboo, so I was like really like into it because I loved all of the Asian looking stuff. But I was really into that look. But I would go
that might be what draws me away from it a little bit. I'm not totally sure I like the kind of feudal Japan look to it.
It's kind of the idea that I've heard, like, behind them is more so like the Mongols. I guess if one thing you could really look at, and this would sell on the concept, and I'm pretty gone on it, is Skywind's Orcish. Hold on, I'll just send a picture through. Done. There's the concept of final render, and then that might actually sell you a bit more on the blend that blends barbaric of a bit more of the modern Orcish, but still with that Mongolian-ish sort of look.
I do love that actually, and thinking about it as more Mongolian does work. Okay, now I'm very torn because I was leaning towards Skyrim, but that is also so iconic to me because I loved playing a kind of the more barbaric aspect of orcs wearing that armor.
And that's still cool and stuff too. And you could even rationalize it a little further. You could say that maybe perhaps this kind of Mongolian Orcish is like, you know, more Orcidium style Orcish when it's a higher civilization than the brutish. But like the thing is, at the end of the day, even primitive, like even cultures with like low levels of metallurgy or something can create armor that is more like the rugged sort of like jammed metal, jagged kind of stuff is an aesthetic choice. Like if you go look at like Bronze Age civilizations or anything, the armor they're making still looks like a cohesive like piece. Like you don't, it's not like, oh, I'm barbaric, so all of a sudden I can't like hammer straight and it's got to be jagged and and that's it, like chunky plates.
Stronghold orcs I can see wearing the Skyrim one, but at the same time, a culture that is very strong on honor, I can see them very much kind of taking pride in the Morrowind version of the armor and the craftsmanship that goes into it, as you've kind of alluded at already, than just slapping daunting looking slabs of metal together.
Yeah.
So
and
I'm willing to see this one, I think, because
because you have a whole culture about like such a big part of it is smithing, and they have the forge wife and everything, and it's like that, and then it's like it actually just looks like chunky and you know, barbaric. Yeah. It's because once again, it is that Lord of the Rings influence, but it's like, it is that Uruk-hai looking armor, which is cool. But for me, that's Lord of the Rings orcs, not, you know what I mean, Elder Scrolls orcs as much. I just...
Yeah, I'm in agreement there.
But yeah.
All right. Morrowind. Now we move on to Chitin armor. Chitin armor is...
None in Oblivion.
There's none in Oblivion. It's cool in all games. Weirdly, I am actually very fond of Skyrim's Chitin look. I do like it.
Yeah.
But I feel like the graphics can carry it a lot.
Yeah.
Like Morrowind's is more like you really look like you're wearing chitin, like some.
It looks like you're wearing pieces of bug, which is what it's supposed to be. It's kind of hard. I don't know. Drew, what's your thoughts?
I like Skyrim's more.
Ooh.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's not... I mean, also Skyrim has heavy chitin as well, as chitin.
Which I prefer to like. I really like the crustaceous mask of the heavy set.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with Skyrim's, though I wish it was a little sleeker. Even the heavy set, like just a little...
I mean, it's one of those things where they're both pretty good. To be honest, like, it was like a pretty faithful... translation of it. Like it's the same way I feel about the Bonemold in Skyrim. Like I like the Bonemold in Skyrim, but it's a faithful translation. I prefer the Morrowind one in for Bonemold, but I don't know. I'm literally on the fence. It could be either for Skyrim or Morrowind.
In the Skyrim one, it's a lot easier to see the parts of the creature repurposed, as opposed to like in Morrowind. Obviously, this is somewhat a graphical thing. But it's much more form-fitting in that it seems almost perfectly crafted around a mortal body shape. The Skyrim heavy one...
I see what you mean.
Like, you can't really work that much with chitin, you know, depending on the magical properties of it, and I think that's done well in Skyrim.
Yeah. No, fair enough. I'm happy to give that to Skyrim, if you are, Michael.
Yeah. Me too. If we're actually moving on to... Elven armor, I guess that's when we have to say that that's not really in Morrowind.
Yeah, it's not. Because the Elven, here's a fun fact for people, is but Elven, the glass armor initially was supposed to be like, that's what the Elven armor is. And that's when you get that very crystalline look. It's supposed to be what Somerset kind of is. But then obviously Oblivion comes and gives the Lord of the Rings aesthetic to the elves. And you got it. But by the way, that's a cool aesthetic. Like, Peter Jackson's sort of Lord of the Rings trilogy, the way they depict the elven armor and everything, it's very iconic, really cool. Like, I can't. And I very, like, at the same time we say this, like, I still accept the way it is, like, now, and like it now. Like, I'm not like, that's not what they're supposed to be. It's the same thing as the jungle. Like, you can't, Jungle Cyrodiil, you can't, you know, it's all getting retconned out, you know.
I think we're going to have a strong consensus on this.
Well, I hope so, because that could be a hot take.
Okay.
No, I love Oblivions.
Okay.
I think it's fantastic.
I think I would do Oblivion only because it is more exotic. I'm not a huge fan of the helmet too much.
I like the helmet.
I do think Skyrim's is a very cool, really cool elven, like sleek sort of design, the way the helmet comes across and all of it.
I might be being too nice to Oblivion, but if you took the goofiness out of Oblivion, maybe even had a version that kind of closed off the face, the spikes, like kind of like the wings, you could call it, that come out the top, feel very elven to me. Not only in terms of the kind of like the wingspan aesthetic, but also just kind of reaching higher, adding to their height, rather than.
Dude, I'm honestly I'm pretty torn. Like Skyrim's is still really good, I think.
Can I interject here and say, when you said strong consensus, I was expecting Skyrim.
Okay, no.
Okay.
I'm a big Skyrim fan. Mind you, there is also the light armor variant in Skyrim. Not that it's particularly cool because it's missing the
gilded,
the pauldrons, which are really nice.
Yeah,
I really like Skyrim's. I like it depends what photo you're looking at. Like different shots of it can obviously look a different way, and it is hard to separate Oblivion's stylistic approach with the armor. And you have to in your brain try and port it into Skyrim. Look at the picture I've just sent of this. It's just Skyrim's elven armor. That's nice. Like I really like.
Yeah,
that.
no, I agree. There is something a little bit alien as well about the Oblivion.
That's what I was about to say.
Yeah.
One of them is supposed to be the Thalmor armor. One of them is supposed to be the Aelid armor, clearly. Like, even like the sort of like, well, all of the statues in Oblivion of the Aelids and the Aelid, like, enemies and stuff all look like have that armor. So it's supposed to be an Aelid armor, and look at its feet. Like, I like it for those reasons. It's sort of like a jungle-ish bird looking thing. Whereas the reasons you really get like this sort of Thalmor kind of like leaf Oriel sort of eagle looking. Do you know what I mean? Like, and the shield is like the crest. It's like, it's all. I would probably overall for general purpose use, I would go Skyrim, but for Oblivion, I do really like Oblivion's. But to me, in my head, it really is. Oh, this is the Aelid armor, if that makes sense. Like it's kind of like I don't know. I associate it too much with the Aelid ruins. And
how's that for big consensus?
I don't. Maybe it could also be partially the aesthetic of Oblivion. Is everything is much more bright and colorful, and the shield. I much prefer the Oblivion shield as being high elven, even if we are accepting the fact that there's a difference between Somerset and Cyrodiil high elves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, yeah. I think the helmet is probably the part that sells it for Oblivion, personally.
Okay, that's
but
kind of
fair enough.
Yeah,
I actually do like both of them, and it does depend if you're playing a male or a female in Oblivion, because the cuirass is quite different.
And
the male one
Skyrim,
has these lines across,
and the Skyrim one has very like prominent boob armor right there. It's just like big boob.
I was actually talking more about like so does Oblivion's. Obviously not as like not as large.
The Elven one's just so like rounded.
It stands out a lot. Yeah, it stands out a fair bit on both.
Yeah.
Where like I like that Oblivion's male one has this kind of layered lines kind of going diagonal in Oblivion's, but I still think I would give it to Skyrim.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we'll go with Elven for Skyrim. I think it's not by it's a lot of these, to be honest. Fair. A lot of them, like you'll hear it clearly from us when it's very decisive. Like the other ones, like rubbish. Like
I like them all.
I do like the look of the Skyrim one, so it's no problem. I mean, if I had a criticism, I'd say both of them could be more elegant. I think the Oblivion one is more elegant than the Skyrim one, personally. Skyrim one, to me, even though it has the kind of feathered style to it, is fairly solid. And I don't know, I can imagine, obviously there's got to be the practical purpose, but I feel like the High Elves would prioritize beauty even when it comes to their smithing.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Let's talk about Stalhrim.
Yeah, so really,
armor of icy material.
It's only been in 2 DLCs, so Morrowind's DLC in Blood Moon, and then Dragonborn for Skyrim, and I think it was actually called Ice Armor, not Stalhrim, in Morrowind, but it is Stalhrim. It's made of Stalhrim, but they just called it the Ice Armor. I think it was.
Yeah. I like now this. I don't know if this is I like them both, but I want to give points to Morrowind's look, because it just feels very. So part of me likes the blocky kind of look. If I imagine it translated into like a.
Well, remember, there's also a heavy Ender Light version in
Morrowind,
in Skyrim.
Yeah, I know. In Skyrim, I definitely prefer the light version. I think it's really nice, especially with the furs and stuff around the shoulder area.
We're not ranking these. We said we weren't, but there is that Stalhrim fur armor in the Creation Club thing added, and I'm quite partial to that. I kind of like the metal face. It kind of reminds me, like, funnily enough, if I was to like remaster the Cryomancer build, did ages ago, where it's like Stalhrim armor with a Dawnguard helmet, like that helmet is literally perfect for it. It's a Stalhrim sort of helmet with like a full faceplate kind of thing.
That is actually really cool.
But we're not factoring that in, because that's like a after the fact kind of thing. We're trying to like look more so at like, you know, the games with their DLC and kind of leave it at that.
I think
not their 10-year anniversary re-release.
I think in Skyrim and Morrowind, Stalhrim is a very over-the-top armor. Like, it looks almost a bit robotic in Morrowind, and in Skyrim it still looks almost like I am the ice superhero character. Like, it's very...
I kind of like more saturation, a bit of the bluish kind of color. I think I'd probably go Skyrim. It's not like a... you know, necessarily like, yeah, that's, I don't know. I think I'm still a Skyrim fan of it. And I also like having horns on it being like a Nordic-y kind of vibe thing.
That was
like,
what I was going to say. I can't decide between the two, but having it look more Nordic is probably what sells it for Skyrim.
So you like the heavy one in Skyrim with the horns coming out? Because I actually like the horns going up and back. It makes
both.
me think of the Death Brand kind of setup, where you get the full armor and the two scimitars and just start slicing.
I can't.
Yeah, I'm leaning more Skyrim's way now, but I think there is something to say about Morrowind's as far as it being kind of enhanced into new graphics, and the shield in Morrowind is quite interesting. It feels very like classic.
I'd probably prefer the Morrowind shield over.
Yeah,
this.
it's got this almost like magical look to it. You know, it looks like a piece, like it could be on an amulet if it was small. It's like a little, almost like it would reflect magic, maybe.
Am I just seeing this, or in the Morrowind one, are the pauldrons kind of shaped like an animal? Shaped like a bear's head or something, but it's just doesn't really come through in the graphics.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Because that is cool.
Yeah, that is.
Because remember,
that's true. That's cool. I like that.
It is cool. I'd still, I would still go Skyrim over it, but I do like the Morrowind one.
That's fair.
Yeah.
It's the light variant that sells it.
All right.
As well.
I wonder.
Here's a controversial.
Now this one I wonder. I'm just curious. So Ebony. All right. Like you guys go first. Yeah, I want to hear yours first. I just want to hear.
Drew.
Oh, you go. I want to properly have a little look at them first.
Okay. All right. Well, fine.
I mean, I can go.
You go. Go. Let me hear.
So I'll just go through each one as I talk about it. So Morrowind's Ebony is cool. It's obviously like the older armors. It has that black and gold look to it. Yeah. Oblivion's also has this iconic black and gold look to it. And I think I'm about to arrive at the take that Scott actually has.
Probably.
But I like Skyrim's Ebony the most. I just wish it had gold trim on it.
Exactly it. That's exactly my take. And if you the Immedian Born, I think it's Immedian Born Book of Silence free texture, you can get. There's plenty of mods out there that basically add back the gold trim, and when you do have that gold trim back, actually talking about the Creation Club again, but there is the Ebony plate armor, and it adds like a kind of, it's more brassy looking, but a goldishy brassy sort of trim and stuff, and it's better. I do miss the iconic, because Ebony is supposed to be a very expensive rare armor, especially in the Third Era. The Empire controls all the export of Ebony from Morrowind and everything like that. It's supposed to be a very rare material, and like, only very rich characters like Duke Vader and stuff, and like they all have this sort of Ebony, and I just think it's I don't know, the gold trim just fits for me. I just think and black and gold looks mad together, I think.
So maybe it should be more ostentatious rather than as practical as Skyrim's Ebony seems to be.
Yeah, I just
I don't know if we're looking at the female armor variant, it doesn't look super practical. If you're talking about booba, that's the armor set.
Skyrim's just look pure, just like if you just looked at like the mesh, so I think is the coolest one of them all. But that with a gold trim, I just wish they didn't just go black. And once again, for some reason, I feel like it's a Dark Soulish sort of era, because I swear there's armor that looks very sort of similar-ish. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I mean, look, Dark Souls just covers medieval, so maybe it sounds silly saying, "Oh, Dark Souls," and it's just like what medieval looking. But I do, yeah.
I think if Oblivion had a full helm, more in line with, obviously it couldn't look like Skyrim's because it would need to fit the style, but I think I like Oblivion's the most, but for the helmet.
Yeah, I can actually kind of agree on that, to be honest. It really is the helmet that kind of kills it. I actually...
Wait, you like Oblivion's the most, Scott?
Maybe I'm changing, because I'm having another look at it. Maybe it's harder than I think, because...
especially when you consider the fact it's supposed to be such a rare and expensive metal, and then you look at the shield, the ebony shield in Oblivion, and it shows wealth, doesn't it?
I suppose it's not fair for me to say Skyrim but with gold trim, because the reality is it doesn't have gold trim.
True.
And we have to base it
off what's there. So running in theme with that, look at this picture I just sent, the Sky Oblivion ebony armor, and just use that to inform your decision further.
Yeah.
But that
Sky Oblivion wins, if we're allowed to say that.
Yeah, but that is, once again, it's playing on that more like rich sort of black and gold kind of style, which I think... But even looking at Oblivion's, I think it's just the helmet. They are obsessed with open face helmets, and that was the game that they should have had every helmet be full helm.
But then what's your beef with Morrowind's then? Because that has a closed helmet, and it's just stylistically like Morrowind. If you enhance that,
yeah, I guess theoretically, but there's something still just
it looks a bit skinny
about it. Like there's some,
and I think there's too much silver on it, because the legs and parts of the arms and body piece aren't like jet black, you know?
Yeah, I think it's also the helmet, and maybe it is just, once again, a graphical thing, but it's kind of hard to tell what's going on sometimes when you look at it. Yeah. But that could be a graphical thing. But then I would even say the thing over Oblivion's, it has like, I don't know, like if you look at the sort of the sleeves and the pauldrons and stuff, it all looks very like neat and intersected and rich. I don't know, like whereas Morrowind's...
Oh, I'm going actually back to... Oblivion's a bit. I'll send an image to you two that I think looks really cool, because all the images that come up are of Umbra, but this just looks a bit thicker. It's just some, I don't know.
Actually, you know what?
Male warrior character that looks pretty cool.
Look, I'm gonna go with Oblivion.
Yeah, me too.
I think I've been changed. Yeah, I really actually, looking at the Oblivion one again, really like the legs down, like as well. All the intersecting plates and stuff. Do you know what?
Oblivion
Even in that
wins.
one, I don't mind the helmet in that particular
in that
shot.
picture. It's a good picture.
The male helmet is a lot better.
Yeah, the other one looks like a bit. It just,
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right, we'll give that one to Oblivion.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Skyrim's is just still really cool. I just wish it had some gold trim.
Yeah.
I guess we could talk about glass armor next.
Yeah.
And we've got a bone to pick with Skyrim's glass armor for going against probably what glass armor should look like. It just looks a bit too elven with green tinge.
Well, like, that's what I think. Like they've kind of, it's probably, glass is probably one of the armors where they had a really different idea for each one. So like the initial one, if you look at Morrowind's, it's all of that, like supposed to be kind of what Somerset Elves were, and it's all like this glass armor, but it's added onto metal, which kind of makes sense, but it's all like decorative and there's parts of it and like, you know, chipped everywhere and stuff like that. Skyrim's kind of goes with the same like idea of that it's not just entirely sheets of glass, it's like, you know, metal incorporated with glass, but it goes for an entire like that really Thalmor-y elven sort of like modern aesthetic, which I think's not as interesting. But then you have Oblivion's, which I'm actually like partial to. I enjoyed it as a kid because it is this big standout green armor. I just thought it looked cool. My personal take is I love Morrowind's one over the top, like for me. But
yeah, having it be volcanic glass, and I'm forgetting the story, but isn't it that, you know, it's always kind of originated from Morrowind as well, glass armor? even though it's been used by the High Elves.
I think it's what the High Elves did with volcanic glass or something. I can't remember the exact of it. But initially the one in Morrowind, the idea was that it was like of an elven sort of design. And glass still is of an elven sort of design. It's just the elven design's changed. It's no longer this sort of exotic-y looking crystalline.
What do you think of the Oblivion glass armor that I sent in the chat? Nice.
Anyway. Yeah, it's changed my mind, bro.
I think Morrowind definitely wins. It's just so alien, so exotic.
Yeah, I think having the glass be quite jagged and like you have shards of it embedded into the armor, as opposed to this formed glass that just, I don't know, like the idea that it's been blown into the armor doesn't look as good.
I don't know.
As the way Morrowind has it.
I like Oblivion still. I don't like the helmet. But I do like Skyrim's the least, I'd say. Even though it's fine, it's just conceptually I don't like that that's glass armor.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I do like the bright green. I think it's honestly like a big part of it within Skyrim's is that it went for a teal sort of color as opposed to like this bright green glass that makes
it just looks like a variant of Elven armor. Then you wouldn't think twice about that fact.
Well, I guess the thing is though, if you look at Skyrim glass weapons, they look a bit more like glass, a little bit. Like it still has the armor look, but it, to me at least, like especially things like the battle axe and stuff.
I'm a big fan of the standard sword. Glass sword, but So I would glass to Morrowind. I think it's just such an interesting, and also like, it's cool. I just like buoyant armature characters have it and so on. And I think a lot of armor in Morrowind has a lot more prestige because it literally, you couldn't just smith it, and it wasn't just appearing on leveled enemies all of a sudden. It was like certain characters had it, and it was like a bit more. It was cool like that. Like you found Ebony on rich characters. You found there's cool mods for Skyrim that do it, like Morrowind, Morrow Loot Unlimited. Like it changes. Kodlak, for example, has Ebony armor because he's this great respected warrior or so on, and he wears this rich armor that's afforded to him and so on, and it does similar things with other characters. But I do prefer that from a game design. So I want to give prestigious sort of characters prestigious armor, and you know what I mean, and make it a bit more exclusive, but. Okay, so we just did glass.
And it went to Morrowind easily.
Daedric.
I think Oblivion would rank the worst for me when I take the nostalgia goggles off, and I think Daedric can easily be given to Morrowind with all the variants. And again, it's similar to the glass. It's that super iconic looking alien vibe to the armor. Don't get me wrong, in the same way that I like Skyrim's Ebony, I actually like Skyrim's Daedric quite a bit. Obviously it's got that classic I'm a demon look to it, but it's just nice still. I like as well that it wasn't as bright crimson and red as Oblivion's armor. Like it was more of a dark look with the red kind of glow under each piece that was smithed together.
I like, because Daedric at its base is supposed to be Ebony, that's corrupted with like a Daedric soul kind of thing, or essence or whatever. So,
I rank Skyrim's the lowest.
Okay.
Personally.
Really?
Yeah. I think I really do like Oblivion's, but I can't help but give Morrowind extra credit, not just for the way it currently looks and the way the helmet looks, but the way the other the various kinds of Daedric helmet you can find fit the style so much. Also
the shield too, having a face and everything, and still like Morrowind's to me looks the most like demon armor, and it like high crafted and like kind of, I don't know, I really vibe. And
Morrowind, the greaves on Morrowind's one looks so good, like the faces on the knee pads and the pointed shoulders I like the most on Morrowind's. For me it's Morrowind.
Yeah, same. I'm curious, what don't you like about Skyrim's one compared to Oblivion's? Because Oblivion's to me is just a bit like overlordy. Is that
Skyrim's is iconic, and I do love the jagged rigidness of it. I almost wouldn't want Daedric armor to be any one of them. I like the idea that it's kind of more malleable as a concept.
Yeah.
But I think it's too black. It needs to be.
But that's
more...
also in that photo. Do you remember if you go into dark spaces, the red glow underneath all of the things, which I kind of like as well.
I think as well the helmet does look cool, but to me, I associate it more with kind of like a dragon aesthetic than a demonic kind of deadland. If we're using Mehrunes Dagon deadlands as kind of the vibe, obviously, if we're talking about Oblivion in general, there are so many ways Daedric armor could really manifest, but.
That is an interesting point, actually, because I think for me in my head that a Dremora wearing something more like Oblivion's Daedric makes sense than like a bunch of like with the full helm from Skyrim all running around, wear Dremora, because you can't. I would definitely remember the Dremora idea more.
On the Greatest Daedra video thumbnail and stuff, the Legends art of the Daedric armor too, like that will help you just upscale it in your mind, but. You've sold me on that being second. Like I think Skyrim would be the least. I do still like Skyrim's though, so
I think it needs to be creepier. And there's something about the kind of the black pits for eyes in Skyrim's that kind of evokes nothing. I like it. I like Morrowind's the most because it kind of embraces a slightly obscure look on top of the scary look.
The Legends armor is definitely changing my mind. There's actually a few. Although there is actually some Legends art wearing Daedric armor that's more like Skyrim's, but without the helmet, and it does look cool. I'll just send it. See what you.
Do you know what Daedric armor has always reminded me of? Did you ever watch? I don't know if you guys were Power Rangers fans.
A bit. Yeah, I think I just watched the films though.
Okay. Did you watch Power Rangers in Space, which was like. Two of them. Okay, maybe not, but there's this guy called Ecliptor who's the villain. I'll send a picture in, and it's what Daedric armor in Skyrim always has reminded me of.
Okay.
But yeah, I can see what you mean with the Legends there too, with it more. Buy it more. But see cool. See the big pauldrons and stuff, the designs, how it went out jagged and spiky and stuff. It always reminded me of... the Skyrim Daedric always reminded me of that. Which just I don't know why, just the look like.
Yeah. I think I feel wrong giving an opinion on this because I think it needs to vary so much. You can't really pin it to one culture the way you can with a lot of the other armor sets. So I think personally, if it wasn't for Morrowind's helmets and the variations of those, Oblivion takes it for me. But I just love the various forms of Daedric helmet you see in Oblivion.
In Morrowind.
Oh, sorry, Morrowind.
Yeah. I think Morrowind would take it for me no matter what, even if it was just one helmet. But I think we can all agree that Morrowind
wins.
As it is.
Yeah, no, fair.
So let's talk about some dragon made armors, dragon scale.
Yeah, so there really isn't. There's obviously Dragon Scale and Dragon Bone. Like there's a Dragon Bone legendary item, Dragon Bone cuirass in Morrowind, and it's just the chest piece, and it kind of it looks like cool. I don't know. To me, it wasn't enough to qualify, I guess. But with Dragon Scale, there's the Imperial Dragon Scale in Morrowind, which is the cuirass and helm, and it looks unique enough, I guess, that it just kind of pops a bit more, that you could compare it to Dragon Scale in Skyrim. And
I still think Skyrim's wins.
For me. Let
me get it.
I actually like the Morrowind one more because it looks like a hide of a dragon more. I have actually never been a fan of Dragon Scale much in Skyrim. I think there's, once again, the Creation Club actually did a studded Dragon Scale variant, and I think that's much better. There is something that looks a little bit like I don't know. I don't want to sound too hard. It's kind of like, I don't know. It just feels very. I got an action figure from Big W, and like it just. Do you know what I mean? It looks very.
I think the helmet and shield can give it that look. Like it's a bit too much.
If you told me that was an armor set from He-Man, I'd 100% believe you. That makes sense. Do you know what I mean?
What, and you wouldn't believe it for Morrowinds?
No, I
That's
think
an armor set from He-Man.
No, I wouldn't as much. It could be. It could be like obviously lots of things could be He-Man, but I don't get. It doesn't look as Hasbro to me. The dragon scale in Skyrim just.
Are we looking at? Can you send me the Morrowind one that you're looking at? Because I just realized there's a modded Morrowind one that looks really like, I would say that wins, but if we're looking at, I just want to make sure we're looking at the same vanilla. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know, like
But that's not even. Again, yeah, it's just two pieces of armor. The rest of the body's not.
Yeah,
it's hard to say because you're not looking at a full set of armor.
Yeah, but even the back, I like how there's like the scales down the spine that kind of creates the dragon scale thing. And once again, it's that sort of, it's an older interpretation of the lore when like dragons had way more to do with the Empire and they had dragon scaling. Like the position on dragons was different because the Skyrim lore hadn't been written yet. So, yeah,
I just don't know if we can give that to Morrowind if they don't have a full, like, it's like you could find a, I don't know, it would be like using Savior's hide as Skyrim's fur. I know that's different because it's a Daedric artifact. I'm just trying to get across that it's one.
It's the only comparison. It's two pieces in
and
this.
the helmet, but the helmet is only around the.
Look, if you would put it this way, if I took the gauntlets
bottom.
and the boots off the armor in Skyrim, if you just looked at Dragon Scale cuirass and helmet, if you want a fair comparison, I'd absolutely go.
The cuirass is better in Morrowind. Yeah.
I also think the helmet's better in Morrowind.
I think they're both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there you go. But I would.
No, I can agree that the actual pieces there are quite nice, especially the chest plate. It's not a full set. It's missing a lot, and it's not like Skyrim where the middle piece of your armor you wear actually goes down over your thighs, because remember in Skyrim they didn't have greaves anymore, so it really feels incomplete to me when I see it.
Yeah, I'd still, I don't know, let the audience decide, but I'd prefer, I mean, I might get absolutely ratioed on this.
Drew, no, you won't. You will not.
You fell off.
You just say
no, I'm serious.
After picking the,
because I think
cool
some people really like the dragon scale stuff, but I just think it looks a little too, I don't know, like
I think having it look more like actual scales, which Morrowind does well, is better. But at the same time, I think you're only really giving, I mean, it's fair, but you're only really giving Morrowind any credit because Skyrim is kind of ugly.
But if you look at, for example, if you go on the US page, the studded dragon scale, I do prefer that to the default dragon scale, and I think it just looks, I don't know, it looks more like armor. It looks less toy. Like the helmet still, I'm not great, like huge on and the helmet designs, but like the actual like armor pieces and stuff, I don't know.
But the studded dragon scale is not dragon armor. It's a few bits, isn't it? Like the whole like stomach covering, that's just some.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been made from the scales but cut into squares and stuff. I just kind of like that look. I think when
No, it's cool.
It's the same. It's too much.
We lost him. Well, I guess we get to decide this one.
Well, what do you think? Because I don't really have a strong opinion. I just think that if the Morrowind one was more complete, I'd probably pick it.
Look, I think if you were a bit creative and you remove... Oh, he's back.
Hello.
It was too much. I had to leave.
He raged.
I can't remember how well it meshes, but I feel like if you remove the helmet of Dragon Scale from Skyrim and maybe mix and matched it with a Dragon Priest mask or something, I do like it. I feel it feels wrong to give it to Morrowind, even though that the cuirass does look all right. So I'm going to go for Skyrim. I don't think it's bad. I just think there's a bit too much. It's too much in the bone zone as opposed to the scale.
The bone zone.
Yeah, there's too much bone involved.
So, sorry, what was the summary of that one?
The summary is that you're wrong, and we're going with Skyrim. Wow. That's all you need to know.
I feel like all of us are pretty, except Scott, are pretty impartial about it.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean?
Oh, I don't feel super strongly. I don't know, dude. It's not a complete set.
I don't think anyone's.
I feel like you feel strongly about that part. that it's not a complete set. I feel like when it's 2 or more, I feel like you can kind of get in. Especially, for example, it's not like comparing. Like, for example, boots and gauntlets make up less of what an armor is.
But it's
than
greaves
like
and the whole
chest and
the whole
helmet.
legs. It's not just boots and gauntlets. It's greaves
Yeah,
and
but
arms.
But the majority of the armor, if you know what I don't know. Like, I feel like there's enough there. It would be different if you're like comparing a helmet or a pair of gauntlets.
It is cool. I like what's there, 100%.
All right then. Well,
give that one to
let's
Skyrim
hit. Let's hit guard armors. So now for this, to preface, we're going to have to basically look at the guards of each of the different cities, holds, and throughout Morrowind as well. So with Morrowind, obviously they did use versions of Bonemold, but they were like sort of what you found them on were more specifically the guards. So like, Aldrun guards, Sadrith Mora guards, Balmora guards. That's kind of what you can use for the 3 houses. I don't know where to
Morrowind is just gonna win.
Well, because it's more exotic, I guess. But the one and it's also, for example, it doesn't fit other areas. And I also don't know where to include Ordinators if we do, like, because they are technically the guards of all of Vivec City and everything. So that's kind of like your equivalent of like your, say, Imperial guards and Imperial
I guess
Palace.
something as well to clarify, because I know you wanted to talk about Imperial armors as a separate category, but obviously the guards of the Imperial City are wearing Imperial armor. So we have to think about, are we including them, or are we including like the Coral guards, Bruma guards?
Let's just, for the moment, let's just establish Skyrim to Oblivion, because Morrowind's is a little bit of a weird exception because they don't use like they do. It's guard there. Look, it's categorized differently, but let's just look. Skyrim hold guards to Oblivion hold guards. For me, the answer is Oblivion. Quite clearly, I like they like the armor combinations and everything. I just think it looks cooler, and I like how they all have different sigils. I think the guard armors in Skyrim just had like slight color differences. Well, sometimes, but you know what I mean. Like sometimes,
the variety is what does it for sure.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously, if you can bring mods into the fold and show like the diversity of Skyrim's guard armors, then there's no question. But the guard armor is iconic in Skyrim, but they're all very samey.
Yeah, I kind of prefer the classic. But also, remember, like Skyrim, obviously Skyrim is trying to make a Skyrim-looking guard armor. But like if you go look at the guard armor replacer or something like that, you can see it done well. Like another thing too, it's just a little bit of like that silly design kind of feel. And it's just like the sleeveless thing again. Like someone lops your arm, like what's the use of that? Like little chainmail half sleeve when someone they're going to... Like most of your arm's not covered.
It's like,
you're going to have it cut
the
off.
shirts that we're all wearing.
Yeah, it's like that, but it's just like it's just kind of like, well, what's the point? And why is the chainmail like all like raggedy? That's like really like anal kind of stuff, but it's not actually. I don't know. I just don't think Skyrim's is as. I think Oblivion's. I like also there's different sigil and the colors on the tabards and stuff, and I don't know. I kind of like Oblivion's more.
It's hard because Oblivion's guards are so associated with Oblivion's faces for me. And the helmet on the guard armor in Oblivion is not fantastic. And so it's always stop you violated the law, and it's some, super wide looking head with funny eyes and this little steel cap on the top. Whereas, I don't know, Skyrim's is a bit more sleek and stuff. But I do agree that I like, if you take the helmet off, like if you look at some guard captains in Oblivion, I particularly like Coral's armor, with the kind of the tree on the middle of it and on the shield and the nice blue. I think that's pretty cool.
Skyblivion again has obviously done concept art that looks much better and sort of execution. But they actually kind of changed design a bit, so we won't focus on that too much. But
it's always the case with Oblivion that the helmet just lets them down. They just...
Do you know what I'll say just real quick is that Skyrim's guard armor didn't really look like... guard armor, if you think about it. Obviously it becomes so associated with it in your head, but there are some cool builds that you can actually make. Like we made I think using the Riften guard armor because it's purple, we had
the Wayfarer,
the Wayfarer build, and she had a crossbow.
Also the blood, and there was a Blood Rider one as well. I think we used the Solitude guard armor because it was like a red looking
and to me that looks really cool because the helmet's not there. It's got a nice color to it, this kind of like cloth wraps around it and stuff. It looks very decorative and nice, and it doesn't feel like a guard. Wait, what the heck is this? Someone made our build in Hero Forge Minis. I'm like hold on, that's our build, but it's not our build. You'll see what I mean here. Look at this. You can show that caught my attention on the Google image search big time. What did you say the other
I think it was a Blood Rider.
Blood Rider. Yeah, no, that is really cool.
The Skyrim helmet is so iconic.
Yeah.
But not for being, I don't know, yeah, I guess like it isn't really fitting for a guard. And the lack of variety does take points away, but it is like one of the coolest looking helmets in the game. Like I don't know, I like it a lot. I like the aesthetic of the Skyrim guards.
For it to help like sort of narrow some things a little bit more too, like just to clarify again, it's like, the graphics and so on, but when you're comparing the different guard armors, you're sort of also looking at like how well they kind of execute, I guess, the theme of what they're going for. Like, I just think basically my estimation is that if you said, okay, that's what Oblivion's armors look like, I'm like, yeah, that's cool. That's a good execution of what a guard armor should look like and so on. Whereas to me, in Skyrim, there's a very clear, like, improvements to be made all across the board. Do you know what I mean? Even you could improve Oblivion's further.
Yeah.
But...
And like even just the variety in the shields as well is much stronger in Oblivion.
Is it though?
Yeah, the hold guards are just like, they've got the symbols painted on, but it's like wooden with like...
It's always the same shield in Skyrim.
Yeah, no.
Essentially.
Yeah, that's true. They all have the different shapes in Oblivion. I think that aesthetically, I like the Skyrim guard armor set more. I just don't like it as a guard armor. I agree with Scott that it doesn't fit what it's supposed to be as much. And I think the reason it does is because I've seen it thousands of times associated with Skyrim guards. But if I didn't know it was a guard and you showed it to me, it could be any character. Which is why you can blend it up and use it with builds in a really cool way. So I think I'm going to have to give it to Oblivion just based on that.
I also think this is just getting into practicality, but for the kind of peacekeeper of a city, you don't really want everyone with covered faces. You want your guards to be kind of relatable and individual. You don't want them to all be the same person. So if you're talking to a guard, you should be able to recognize them. And yeah, I think as much as the helmet in Oblivion is boring and it's just a whatever helmet, it fits what it needs to be much better than Skyrim.
That's true, because you could easily impersonate a guard in Skyrim, couldn't you? Just chuck the helmet on and walk in. No one's gonna question.
Have a look. I sent through the Sky Oblivion concept art ones, and some of these have been rendered, but I just love how they've altered them all slightly to make them like. Especially, I love the Broomer one with the big two-handed axe and the kite shield. Like really, like sort of. Norman sort of Vikingish look, kind of like it's just really cool.
They do really good stuff. I even like the coral one with the bow and the little hood with the armor underneath.
I have to say, and I don't want to like all of them are really good projects, but I think Sky Oblivion has the one I'm actually most excited about. Also, because I would say I think Oblivion, the base game, needs the most help. Like it needs the biggest like facelift in terms of like culture and stuff like that. Like Morrowind, you go back and play Morrowind, but outside of the gameplay mechanics and stuff, like they're clunky to work with. They're old, but in terms of like the story and the environment and stuff to enjoy, I think it's like well executed for what Morrowind is. But Oblivion,
I think it's easy to get mixed up for people in thinking that Morrowind needs the biggest facelift, because it does in terms of graphics, but it's the lore facelift that Oblivion's stylistic pieces need, like your armor and weapons and cities and stuff like that.
I mean, the Elder Scrolls games have always been fairly good at it, but there's kind of that strange dynamic as well, where when Morrowind came out, and this can be said of a lot of old games like Nintendo 64 games and things like that, is that the limitations of what you could use to make the game force an art style on it more, whereas Oblivion kind of has an aspect of realism to it that dates way worse than Morrowind does.
I see what you mean.
So in that sense,
it's kind of the weird way. It's just like Oblivion looks worse than a highly polished, specifically like low poly game, if that makes sense. Like those games that are meant to look like they could run on the PS2, even though they couldn't. Do you know what I mean? Like, because it becomes more of, oh, that's a style choice.
Exactly.
It's like comparing like pixel art versus, you know what I mean? It's the same reason like a lot of CGI of the early, like, you know, late 90s, early 2000s kind of looks pretty.
Yeah,
you know,
it's like rewatching Shrek 1 again, and you're like, wait,
that's insane.
Yeah, it's like, are all the textures about to pop in, or is this my eyes that are playing up?
Shrek 1 truly is the one. Like, you know, I can watch Shrek 2 and there's a big difference between those two even, but Shrek 1 really does look like, wow, that is old. Like, it looks like, but you forget, it was made on computers from that time, so.
Now I want to watch it to see what you two are talking about.
Oh, it's uncanny, and anyone can go watch it now, and it's strange. It's exactly like when you just
now. It's exactly what I remembered. I don't.
But don't you think it's kind of like when you spawn in a game and the textures haven't popped in yet? That's kind of what it feels like.
I don't know if it's a bit of a letter. Yeah,
we've already finished talking about Orcish armor, so let's get off Shrek.
It looked exactly what I thought. I don't know. You guys hyped it up too much. Well, let's talk about Imperial armors.
Well, just real quick to clarify the last part, like Oblivion would put down as the winner for between Skyrim and Oblivion. Yeah. But I feel like inevitably, if you include Morrowind, the Telvanni guards, Slather guards, Alduran guards look better. Indoor guards. But okay, let's talk Imperial armors, because now we are kind of comparing them as a collective, because there is a variety of them in Skyrim, kind of a variety. Yeah, there is in Oblivion, because they have the Palace Guard armor. And then there is also in Morrowind a variety of armors.
Yeah.
So I'm keen to hear your guys' thoughts.
Morrowind has a very large variety, and obviously the graphics don't do it justice. Like, if you see some different armor concepts for Morrowinds, like, people remake them and they do look really cool. Like, I'll send one now. That's just one of many, but you can really kind of get a different feel. Like, I do like the color purple quite a lot. I enjoy a lot of them. Yeah, that's really cool. Like, I enjoy a lot of, or like all of the Imperial armors, and I grew up with Oblivion, so I thought it was iconic and I really like it. Oblivion's is actually my least favorite. If I'm comparing the problem is, like, actually, if I was really going like what's my like least favorite, it's the Imperial light armor in Skyrim. But the Imperial heavy armor, like the default one, I much prefer over Skyrim's. I do though actually prefer Morrowind's kind of look more, I think, across the board, just with the sort of, I don't know, like, I like that classic, there'd probably be a different name for it, not just cuirass, I don't know, whatever the Romans called it, but like just the chest piece and stuff, and with the horses and the pauldrons, and it's that really like high Roman era kind of style look that I kind of enjoy. And I feel like Skyrim was kind of going back to Morrowind style anyway, because there's a little bit of Roman in Oblivion's with the skirt thing and the sort of like head shape. But then again, there's parts of Skyrim's armor, like the heavy armor, if you get the Imperial, the variant with the closed-faced helm, like that's really, really cool. But I don't know. It would be between Oblivion, Morrowind, and Skyrim. I think I'd put Oblivion at the least for myself. But what do you guys think? I mean, Oblivion is just so iconic, and I mean, there's the Imperial dragon armor as well that you get, which has the gold design all over it, over a classic Legion armor look, which, you know, it has Oblivion's graphics, but you can imagine it looking really special for the, you know, the hero of Kvatch. Main character vibes for sure. I do like the Legion armor. I agree that Skyrim's one, as we said in a previous podcast, would probably be better off in Hammerfell. You can imagine that light armor being picked because it's not freezing, it's hot, and it's easier to travel in, and I can probably vibe that more if I imagine it in a desert. But it's
for
tough.
Skyrim, you need to have the closed helmet for it to compete. I feel like that adds a lot to Skyrim's aesthetic. You know, the closed helmet you can find. Yeah,
that rare one. That's what I was saying. I really like the Skyrim with that. Like, basically, if you look like a Centurion build. Because I will say, in the Morrowind's helmet, I think it's the Imperial Silver, they look pretty whack, some of the helmets. The other ones look kind of standard fare. When I'm looking at Morrowind's, I'm looking more so from the neck down. for the most part. I don't mind the helmets and the standard guard helmets, but I kind of like, I don't know, just the sort of like the Roman shield and the sort of, it just looks the most, Hylar. I don't know. It's kind of hard, but this is what I would say. I prefer your average Imperial in Morrowind to your average Imperial you'll find in Skyrim, because in default Skyrim, most of them are wearing that leather one, the light armor. Like, you only ever see really the legates, wearing them and stuff like that, the heavy armor. And you also never see an NPC really wearing the closed-faced helmet. It's just the one you can find. So I would actually, I don't know if that really factors in too much, but I would just say, if I was to say, because if you just said, oh, what's your favorite Imperial armor in any of them? I'd probably just say Morrowind, because in Skyrim, you don't actually see the coolest Imperial armor for most of the game. For a lot of the time, it's like hidden.
Panitas Oculatus armor is cool as well, but again, it's just not the main one there. I don't know. I'm not really about the Oblivion hate. I quite like the Legion Guard armor in Oblivion.
I do, even though there's not much of the Roman to it, with the exception of the helmet.
And I like the... I know we're talking about armor, but I like the fact that it's matched with silver weaponry and not this very wide-looking sword that they had in Skyrim. Though you could say that about a lot of weapons. They could be made a little thinner.
Yeah, I guess...
It's hard to say. I will say I don't have a crazy strong opinion about it, but I don't think it would be fair to use the Skyrim closed helmet one, because it's rare.
Okay.
If that's the case, then I would probably just go with Morrowind's, I think. I mean, I don't know, actually. There is also another one I really like. It's called From Morrowind. It's another variant. It's a rarer variant, but the Imperial Templar armor. I'll just send it through in case.
There is a lot of cool stuff.
Well, see, that's the one I've been thinking about when talking about Morrowind.
I'll just send through the other picture that literally has them all together. I mean, this one actually has the Imperial Dragon scale there because it's technically an Imperial armor, but like, don't factor that in. Not that you either really liked it.
Yeah, the Imperial Templar armor is the one I like from Morrowind.
Yeah. But that would be your equivalent, I guess. You could equivalent that to like the Imperial Palace Guard armor or something like that. But I just think this is more of a Rome Byzantine sort of look. And it has that kind of... I also like that it has, like, if you look at the one with the horses on the chest piece and so on, it's also got like greaves and like kind of armor pieces that look like it's like Roman, but in a medieval setting, as opposed to just going back to like, do you know what I mean? Like,
if
I don't
we
know.
kind of not sure about Skyrim versus Oblivion, or we can't reach a consensus on that, do we all agree though that Morrowind's is really cool?
I really like a Morrowind's Imperial armor over the top. I think, it wins it wins in variety. It just has more variants. But I think for the standard Imperial sort of that you see around, like when you go to the forts and so on, I generally like, and if you imagine them like, up to a graphical standard, a modern graphical standard, I prefer Morrowind's over it. Skyrim's are not that, like, Skyrim's could get there easily. Like Elder Scrolls 6 could be of that, standard equivalent. It's on the way there. I don't know. I don't hate Oblivions or anything, but it's just kind of, I don't know, the hard iron sort of look. It just doesn't, I don't know. It doesn't shout Empire.
I like it. I know it's
I feel like
influenced by nostalgia for sure.
I feel like those neutral people from Futurama who have no strong opinion one way or the other. That's exactly how I feel talking about this.
Fair enough. I guess then Scott and I can just weigh it to Morrowind and settle it that way.
I would say Morrowind, but it's not some but I still agree in the general, like, it's not some crazy like definitive, like any of them are really like horrible, but just
okay. Well, I don't think we're going to talk about Elder Scrolls Online armors, nor do I think we're going to talk about Arena or Daggerfall.
No, we won't. There's no point in comparing that.
It's very hard to up the graphics in your mind. I mean, there are obviously some cool designs in there, without a doubt.
It's like the ESO stuff doesn't follow necessarily the same thing, and it looks different. Some like, I think there was a comment on recent stuff about was sort of saying that like we're harping on about Elder Scrolls Online looking like World of Warcraft or something. The initial base armors, if you look at it, like everything ESO in terms of like story and lore and all that kind of stuff, and weapons and armor, I think has gotten better over time with each of the expansions. But if you look at the OG sets of stuff, it looks really manufactured, and some of it looks really clunky, like ridiculous.
Have you seen Daedric armor in the Elder Scrolls Online?
I'd have to refresh my
Because
memory.
I don't know, there's this Daedric style.
Yeah,
but
well, the
it's
styles
not-
is kind of.
It's not really like Daedric armor per se.
It's
I
that
get-
weird.
it doesn't look. There's no redness. I'll say that.
Look, and sometimes when I go back and look at ESOs, especially the standard sets, when people tell me that this is not a poor looking armor, like, dude, it looks.
Look at this. I'll just send a link and scroll to the bottom where there's like a gallery of like the light, medium, heavy Daedric style. But again, it's style. So it makes me think
I
like,
don't know.
what is this, like a cultist? Or are you saying this is actually Daedric armor pieces? Because
No, it's. Yeah, it is. It's the same as there's all the styles for the different things. Because there's the whole, like, you can make your armors, like, look different styles and so on. Like, whatever you want. Like,
no, I know
regardless,
there's an aesthetic. I know that. I'm just saying, is this meant to be stylistic, a piece of forged Daedric?
I feel like I think so.
Why is it green?
But green. I don't know, dude. Look, just this is why we're not. So let's just say, like, oh, there you go, whatever the extra lose in, like ESO, like the Bonemold, or they didn't kind of do Bonemold. They turned it all into like a steelish looking. I can't even remember if they call it Bonemold, because it just looks. I don't know, like it doesn't look like Bonemold anymore.
Where is it?
A lot
Where
of
is
it. Some of them are okay. I like. This is a shot from the trailer. Hold on. From the Vardenfell trailer, you'll see all of them. But like, one of them kind of looks fine. But do you know what I mean? It looks.
Oh, you can tell it's bone mold for sure. It's just a bit too
my
Dwemer,
problem
bronzy looking, fancy.
Maybe I'm going to change my language now, and it's not. Instead of saying World of Warcraft, because I think people get like lost with what I mean by that it's like all these giant, like huge pauldrons, and it's not so much the proportions, but what I'm saying is ESO has a tendency to look manufactured, as in the armor is made in a modern factory, and then it's pushed out. Like it looks like, oh, here's my Spec Ops cyberpunk sort of kind of like designed armor. Wouldn't expect, it doesn't look like, it sounds like, I don't know, it doesn't look tactile. It doesn't look like it's made in the 15th century.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? And that's generally my preference. Is I like it to look like, though, that, you know, it was built in that time period. But yeah. Even though it's not strictly historical, obviously.
I'm looking at some arena armor sets right now, giving me massive RuneScape vibes. Looks like some rune armor, that blue.
Well,
gotta get that.
I'm curious. What? This is a big question, so we could always make it more confined than just any armor from any game. But which of the armors we've talked about kind of jump out at you the most as your favorite for any reason, or is that a whole nother topic in itself?
Probably a whole other topic. 'Cause sometimes it's also like what mood, but I do think, like you kind of said before, I think Bonemold looks super cool, super iconic. And it just kind of, and also has variability and stuff. I think the whole concept of Bonemold armor and the different guard style, it's really, really cool. I think it's something you don't really see. That's the other thing. It's unique. That's what's got going for it.
I think for me, like the obvious answer is the various iterations and different ways of having Daedric armor will always be, to me, the most interesting and the ones I find the coolest. But that's kind of also probably the obvious take.
Yeah. Oh, I have to say, I really do like Indoril armor, like the Ordinator's armor and stuff. I think is a really cool looking. Obviously, for me, it's a huge Morrowind bias. Just the visuals, I really like it. And I made a tweet ages ago, a long time ago, but I was like, I wonder what it is, but I have a very specific taste. And it's like this closed sort of visor thing. It's like if you ever play Knights of the Old Republic. the Mandalorians. I remember being so into their armor, and it's the same visored style kind of like as the Bonemold, and I swear I just like that kind of visor thing. Like I grew up with Star Wars, so I like a lot of like I like how Morrowind incorporates a bit more of that sci-fi look into a fantasy, and I think the mix makes it fairly unique.
Yeah, the variations of all the different helmet styles, like even it on the chitin and the netch leather, when you've got these kind of like the goggles, the kind of add the really alien aesthetic to Morrowind.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is, if you took the chitin armor set and you threw it in Star Wars and said that this is a bounty hunter and give him a blaster, you'd be like, yeah, it makes sense. But that's, to me, is the sell of it. Some people really prefer the strict fantasy. I like the mix, but like,
yeah,
I can see if it's not everyone's cup of tea. Like, I can see if it's not. Like, but for me personally, I really like a little bit of the genre bending kind of stuff. I think it, to a degree, you don't want to lose touch with what the initial genre is, but if you just tweak it to give it some flavor. I even really like the netch leather and stuff, but I guess, I don't know, unless you want to talk about like Skyrim, Oblivion sort of sets, is probably a little bit more of a grounded answer, because it's not just, I love all the stuff from Morrowind. But,
well, I think Morrowind, it would be the Daedric for me. Oh,
Oh,
sorry, not
Daedric-
Morrowind, Oblivion. Well, I guess it would be for both, but I meant in Oblivion. Daedric stands out the most to me.
yeah. Oblivion's actually kind of a tough one, because now I'm like so spoilt for choice, because to me, I think I generally prefer the armors in the other games for the most part. Like, yeah, except the Ebony. Yeah, I think Ebony, for me personally, was the only one that... Yeah, Ebony was the only one that I preferred Oblivion over any of them.
I liked Oblivion's steel. It had a good steel.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You guys preferred the steel.
Ebony.
Yeah. But I prefer the steel.
Yeah, I feel like I've never ever said I like steel armor in an Elder Scrolls game. It's kind of just like when you're forced to make a decision. But I like steel plate in Skyrim.
Oh,
if I had to say one.
That's
true.
fair too. That's true.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's do a tally. Okay, so let's just count up all the Morrowinds. So iron, leather, Bonemold, Orcish, glass, Daedric, and Imperial.
I think we said Morrowind enough that Morrowind's the one that...
Oh, it wins for sure.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know...
By
you
how
don't want to know
much?
by how much it won?
Yeah.
We'll now have to count again. I've become distracted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to Morrowind. And Oblivion... are we including steel plate, though? Or we're saying Oblivion wins steel? I think that's fair.
Oblivion
I
needs
think
all the help
Oblivion
it can
wins
get.
Yeah.
And you guys gave Oblivion first. So 1, 2...
Oh, that's right.
and guard armors, 3. And then Skyrim got not a whole... Dwarven, Chitin, Elven, Stalhrim. So that's 4. And then if we give it dragon scale, it gets 5.
Actually, I have to be fair too. You know, with Skyrim, actually Skyrim won some of those with less competition. Like, for example, like Stalhrim, it's only competing with Morrowind. Or like Chitin, it's only competing with Morrowind. Or Elven, it's only competing with Oblivion.
And sometimes Oblivion just missed out too. Like the Dwarven in Oblivion was pretty cool, but and like Morrowind easily lost that. But if we're just looking at numbers, 7 to Morrowind, 3 to Oblivion, and 5 to Skyrim.
I think that's fair.
Looks like Morrowind has the best armors after all. Based FudgeMuppet
in terms of
channel.
design. Obviously not in terms of graphics, but in terms of just concept and design. But man, I will say the whole Skyrim Anniversary Edition, all the Creation Club stuff, a lot of the armor variants are really good. Like, if we included them in this, it would change a lot of my views. Like, you can't, like, if you were including Anniversary Edition, but I feel like it's kind of, even if it feels very official now because it's part of like an official released game, I do it just feels like an uneven playing field. But like, I actually really like the iron. There's iron plate. If you're on the US page, they're all there, like all lined up. But there's the iron plate, There is the steel. I think it's called Steel Soldier, or something. Is another really cool set. I think a lot of them are inspired by blades. Sometimes they could be have a few tweaks, but there's, the Spell Knight armor, silver armor, ebony plate armor. Like, I actually prefer both of the variants of that. There's a dragon plate insulated armor and the studded dragon scale, like we were talking before. But I prefer both of those to their original. Even things like, some of them are only partially, but there's like Dwarven plate, which I think is only 2 pieces, same as the Dwarven Daedric plate. But Daedric mail is another cool variant. Like, I just think they added in a bunch of cool variants that they needed. Even I prefer the Orcish plate and Orcish. I think it was called Scaled Orcish or something. It's just cool variants and stuff.
There is some cool stuff there for sure.
Oh, and Dwarven mail actually looks more like your. I feel like that's actually a take. If you can you see where that is? It looks more like the Oblivion-ish armor in terms of the visor, but it still looks. It's a nice mix. It's a nice midpoint, I think, between the two designs. Yeah. But yeah, well, I think unless we've got any closing notes, I feel like that's been a pretty big discussion on armor.
Yeah.
We'll think we might not get as much.
Yeah.
Could be quick. It turns out.
Maybe we'll have to rank weapons sometime.
I'd actually be down to do that. I think that's some pretty good
sets. All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. We appreciate it a lot. It's always a pleasure to do the podcast. Social media links are down in the description, as is a link to our merch if you want to get an awesome t-shirt. And we look forward to nerding out with you again very soon.